I'm Sara Sharp. I'm a deal attorney representing people buying and selling accounting practices. And this is my weekly wind down where I open a bottle of wine, or in this case, consume a part of a bottle of wine that's already opened and discuss themes from the week, because things come up a lot when you deal with the same type of industry matter a lot. You get themes. And this week's theme has been about rollover equity in the context of when you're getting an SBA 7A loan and there's also rollover equity involved. So if that is not interesting to you, you may not wish to keep watching this.
Please keep watching. Also like and subscribe if you don't mind.
Unless you're really into Monte Fiorentine Sauve Classico, which is a white. I think all of the wines that I've done so far have been white, so I should probably do something different. It is a rich golden color with a fine aroma of exotic fruits, full and rich in flavor. This is a structured wine, which will reach its peak after 1 to 2 years in a bottle. This is 2022. It's currently 2024. Seems right. It's good. I like this a lot. 4 stars. It's harvested in the middle of October. I do not know when wines are normally harvested, it turns out. Is that standard? Please advise in the comments. Anyways, great wine, great week. Closed some deals. Well, closed a deal in particular that involved some rollover equity. And for folks who are familiar with SBA 7A programs, that has not always been an option. I'm not a banker, so don't come at me. Generally, the primer is the SBA 7A loan was for 100% buyouts. And then the SOPs came out in 2023, standard operating procedures, I think, that said, maybe these could be used for less than 100% acquisition of a business. So that immediately started having people be interested in rollover equity. Rollover equity is a really common component in the middle market. In any private equity deal, it's a big part of it. It just means that you're getting cash, but you're also getting usually ownership in the buyer, which is cool. It's often referred to colloquially as a second bite at the apple, which I think is in the tasting notes of this wine. Yeah, it's a little appley. Second bite at the apple. It can be very appealing for that reason. And I like it conceptually a lot because of the pros. The pros of private equity are that sometimes the buyer doesn't need to bring as much cash to closing because you've got this kind of non-cash consideration. Professional services deals involve so much warm handoff. So making sure that the buyer keeps some skin in the game. Now that also feels like a tasting note, like wine, grape skin. I don't taste anything there. So skin in the game is kind of the name of the game when you're trying to make sure that a client list and client relationships are transitioned. So you've kind of got that built in. And then for the seller, they're interested, right? It's you want to see what became of what you built. So it's got these kind of beautiful components to it that do what I always want terms to do, which is align everyone's incentives. The cons or that is very complex. There's weird provisions there where the seller, is not going off into the sunset on their Alaskan cruise. Instead, they're still an owner. So they have rights to maybe the books and records, and, they have economic rights to the buyer. And so, I always talk with clients, gosh, I'm killing it with idioms today. I just got back from Tennessee where I was visiting my parents who live in East Tennessee, where I'm from, and spending a lot of time on the lake, wake surfing. So fun. When I come back, I have so many colloquialisms that I can't quite share. I can't shed them. Here's another one. That time when you have 1 foot on the boat and 1 foot on the dock. I always want to minimize that time. But if you're selling a company and you're also going to be owning part of the buyer, you've got a little bit of a foot on the boat and the dock for a very long period of time. Of course, you can address all of these with documentation, but then you've got additional legal fees, additional complex documents. You've got rollover equity agreements. You've got the operating agreement to negotiate, the voting rights, the buyout price. What happens if the seller's going to continue working for the buyer and they stop? Of course, in the SBA 7A context, those questions really, really get more sticky and there's more quagmire to them. So the complexity, even though the SOP came down, the entirety of the M&A program was about 100% changeovers. And a lot of the rules that the banks are applying are about making sure that it's an actual changeover between the buyer and the seller, and that the seller, for instance, doesn't participate in any upside. There's also a rule that the seller doesn't work with the buyer for more than 12 months after closing. So you have all of these things and all of these people who maybe their entire career for decades has been about ensuring that clean break between the buyer and seller. And now we have an SOP that says you don't have to do that, but it's very unclear how that affects all of the other things, an employment beyond the 12-month mark, or how that should be applied to the operating agreement. So one, I think you have to get involved with a bank that does a ton of these. You can't expect a bank that doesn't specialize and isn't a preferred SBA lender to be comfortable playing in the inherent gray space around the application of these rules. It's just not realistic. So SBA preferred lender for sure. Honestly, I think it's a rare deal that really it's worth going through the trouble unless you know for sure. And maybe that's a question for your lender when you're talking to them, like, have you closed deals that are 7A loans that involve rollover equity yet? And if so, was it complex? Were there holdups? What were the issues? So a lot of what I always talk about and the drum I'm always beating, hold on. And that's a beautiful wine glass. Paperless Post. Got it at the Goodwill, but I then liked the pattern so much that I bought a water bottle to match. So Paperless Post won. A lot of lenders will have a lot of trouble getting comfortable with the rollover equity concept with an SBA 7A loan. And then the drum I'm always beating is your letter of intent needs to be realistic. So, don't waste time. Like, there's something called a retrade, right? If you have a letter of intent that says I'm going to pay you $4 million and then a weekend you say, $3 million, that's going to anger everyone. So try to minimize your retrades and use them for things that really, really matter, that come up in diligence, that are different than what you could have anticipated, those type of things. So if you're using a loan and you have 7A financing, do not promise that you're going to give something that's impossible, like a promissory note that's not subordinated to the bank, right? That would be insane. The bank won't allow that. Don't promise it. You'll have to take it away. Similarly, with rollover equity, you don't want to make promises that the rollover equity is going to, be preferred, that it's going to have great voting rights, any of those things, because what I have seen is that banks are okay with this economic right. They're reluctantly okay with this economic right of rollover equity continuing for the seller, but they're very uncomfortable with the idea that the seller gets to continue to participate in any kind of management of the business on a day-to-day basis. I would go ahead and put it in my letters of intent if they involve rollover equity. Basically, no voting rights, minimal books and records rights, purely economic. Now, will that create a second class of ownership that then breaks an S-corp election? Is possible. So, consult your lawyers and consult your accountants. It's an interesting thing. It's fun to see in the wild more rollover equity and being actually applied. And I'm seeing it in a ton of the LOIs this week. So it's kind of fun that I got to close one and then I'm seeing it in a lot of LOIs. I think it's definitely taking off as a trend. And there's so much out there about private equity entering into the buying of accounting practices. And while that is very true, I think, entrepreneur through acquisition is huge in the space too. Rollover equity, big theme this week. Really exciting to see it play out. Very valid, but I think if you're going to make it as an offer and to set yourself apart for some of these targets that are out there, just go ahead and set expectations that rollover equity will not be accompanied by a lot of decision-making rights. But everything in the letter of intent, and that's it. This has been this week's weekly wind down. I'm Sara Sharp. I'm a deal attorney that focuses on people buying and selling accounting practices. If you have found this helpful at all, please like, subscribe, comment, share, and thank you. Have a good week.